Today we want to take a look at 4 leading Chinese models and test them to see how good they're really at coding. As usual, we'll be running some of our visual tests, so it's going to cover some of the capabilities of coding, not going to cover every single thing, but I think it's still really valuable test to be able to see how well they perform side by side on many different prompts. So the models I want to test today are the ones that are really leading in the open source. And I want to take the 4 top ranking models today. So we've got the GLM 5.1 from ZAI, we've got Kimi 2.6 from Moonshot, MiMo 2.5 Pro from Xiaomi, and then DeepSeek's V4 Pro thinking model. So they rank pretty well together, so I really want to see how well they really perform in practice. Although I should point out on the code arena here, we've got quite a big gap with the GLM and Kimi K2.6 together, and then we've got 2 more models below. So we'll see whether this gap really materializes in practice. So as usual, you're going to see, if you watched this channel before, you're going to see some of the same tests or some of the new ones as well, where we will be generating 3D generation, some websites, some SVGs, and that way we can really tell how well the different models are adhering to the prompts, how coherent their creations are, and whether there are any kind of systematic issues that we can spot. And hopefully we can use that as a proxy to how that's gonna, how you're gonna experience those models potentially in your own coding experience. So this is one of my favorite prompts for Cappadocia. We want to see the balloons here. This is GLM 5.1. I would say this is pretty good generation. In here you saw the use of light and just the coherence overall was quite good. In here I would say the shape's like a little bit worse, a little bit less like detailed for DeepSeek, but I would say overall is a good generation as well. So I think it's the first time we're actually looking at the MiMo 2.5 Pro. Maybe we looked at it a little bit before, but this will be the more in-depth look. So I'm quite excited to see more of this. So this don't completely look like balloons, but not too bad either. And it's also kind of a big valley. So maybe not like quite as nice as maybe GLM 5.1 to my liking exactly. Kimi K2, so remember it was GLM, then Kimi K2, then MiMo, then DeepSeek. I would say what's interesting about this is that all of the others kind of looked a little bit close to each other in the style and the approach. And I would say here it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit different. The style feels different. So let's look out for this to see if we're going to spot more of these kinds of differences between them. So I've got quite a few. I've got 72 tests, so we're not gonna spend the whole day here. So I'm gonna just open some which kind of look a little bit more interesting. So this is the Coliseum. It's a kind of voxel generation, so we don't want this kind of bulkiness, blockiness of generation. I would say this one is okay to my eye. It's not very detailed. There's not like seating area, there are things overlapping. Like, it's kind of not that impressive, I would say. So let's see. So that was DeepSeek. So let's see if MiMo 2.5 Pro can do a little bit better. Oh, yeah, you know what? I think MiMo does have this kind of weirdness sometimes. Like, obviously, I don't even know what this was going for. I think, I'm guessing different like layers, structures overlapped. So it doesn't, like, it is not at all how it's supposed to be. You can kind of, maybe if you dig through this, maybe you can see the more detail. So that's something to note. Is this just one-off error, or is MiMo more likely to create this kind of weird patterns? What that could tell us is that if you're going to give it a more complex prompt, would it actually flip out and like maybe make more mistakes? So you can see here Kimi K 2.6. I think, I mean, better than the previous one, but still it's not very interesting. Like, you couldn't even be able to tell that's a Coliseum necessarily, just kind of some building. Yeah, the roof sort of detached, so many issues there. So let's take a look at GLM 5.1 to see if this is any better, if it's going to actually deserve the top spot. And look, to my eye, this is by far the best, right? We've got the seating, we've got the kind of people inside the gladiators. We've got actually the town around it. We've got the area. The whole combination is really far more coherent than what we've seen with the others. So I think this is like definitely, it's very clearly, unlike maybe the first one that we looked at, very clearly the win is with GLM here, because yeah, the coherence, the quality of it was by far better. So yeah, let's maybe take a look at this one. So this is my Golden Gate Bridge prompt. I really like it because it's really complex, the way you need to coordinate different elements, and I think it's pretty good proxy for like if you ask for really a lot, and if you look at the prompt, it has like 20 different points it needs to hit, then let's see how well it does. And in here, I think you can see DeepSeek, like this is quite bad generation. It has like some elements that are okay. In terms of like maybe the terrain is not bad, but I mean, I'm giving it a lot of benefit of the doubt considering this is not really like a coherent generation at all. So let's keep checking. So GLM 5.1, I'm gonna say straight away, this is gonna be my favorite one for this, because I do remember looking at the others, and I would say that this was the best one. And while it's not the most imaginative one, and I think, you know, the water is like a little bit boring, let's see, the waves don't quite work, I would say overall, structure-wise, this is really solid. Right? We've got the bridge, we've got things together, cars actually moving, okay, like a bit sideways. So yeah, let's not get too carried away, but it is a very solid generation. Even the comment there, maybe a little hard to see. But if you compare it to others like Kimi K2.6 here, okay, the bridge is not like, I mean, yeah, it's not great, but at least like it is sort of put together. But yeah, clearly the land is overlapping with the sea here. We've got the city, things not connected. So yeah, that's clearly not very good. And MiMo 2.5 Pro. Remember something we noticed, that the terrain was like all over the place. Now it could be that it's just like bad at terrain, or it could be that it actually has some kind of these more structural issues, that it's not just very good at completing these more complex prompts. Like it is possible. So let's keep an eye on that as well to see if we can do any more observations like along these lines. So let's see. I quite like, yeah, let's take a look at this one. Oh, actually, yeah, maybe we'll come back to this. I think there was another MiMo maybe generation that was a little bit odd. But yeah, I do like this prompt as well, just because it requires creativity. What we are looking for here is a kind of coral reef, which is quite rich. And sometimes you see models just generate kind of a flat floor with not much interesting ideas. So I would say I do quite like this generation from DeepSeek, where we've got different types of fish, we've got interesting terrain, we've got different elements. It's not like the most impressive, but I do quite like it. Like I think this is quite nice one. Interestingly, like GLM 5.1 in some of the previous ones was like way better than DeepSeek. I would say here it's not necessarily better. It kind of feels like a little bit boring, although maybe the details like laid out a bit nicer. So who knows? Yeah, MiMo, okay, this is probably the best MiMo generation relatively, but if you go to DeepSeek, the generation here is far more interesting, right? We've got the different fish, we've got like the different elements together. I think that is more interesting than MiMo, but it's like, it's coherent, although I'm not sure how there's like water underneath the water. It's like a little bit odd, but anyway. And Kimi K2, I think terrain is probably the most interesting here, but the rest is quite boring. I think you'll have to agree. So it's like, it's okay, I would say. Yeah, I do want to come back to this one, just because it points to that kind of issue that we keep spotting with MiMo. So we're gonna take a look at that as well. So this is again this kind of a different prompt for Coliseum. It's much more condensed. The other one was like a big Roman city, and this one is much more kind of a voxel, just the Coliseum. So you'd expect way more detail on the Coliseum, and we do definitely see that with the DeepSeek model here. So if you remember, it didn't even have the seating, I think, with the Coliseum. GLM 5.1, the coherence is quite good. you see how everything is very orderly. So I do definitely like that. I think GLM seems to be good at that. But yeah, maybe Kimi, he is even nicer though. Remember, Kimi was the second one, so it is interesting. Here I would actually give the edge to Kimi. I do quite like the clouds. I do like the detail here. The not sure at the time there was a gap here, but it is a nice detail. Yeah, that's actually Kimi, really nice generation. Now let's see. The reason I want to show you this one is that again the MiMo generation is very odd. So it's clearly something's gone wrong. It like became more like a Tower of Pisa. Or I don't even know. Yeah, it's massive. Like I'm trying to see the end. It's ginormous. Anyway, clearly some things are wrong here. So I think something to look out for with MiMo is that whether there are any kind of issues that you spot that kind of break some patterns and so on. So that could be just something to watch out for. But yeah, the Kimi generation was quite good here. Oh, this is actually an example of where MiMo did well. So this really gives me like Opus 4.1 vibes, I think. I remember getting a generation that was quite similar to this. Even to the point of, I mean, the camera is not working very well, so I can't move it around. Even the point where the roof goes like this, did very similar generation. So yeah, it's kind of funny the way it rhymes, or who knows why. GLM 5.1, interesting, right? So I kind of praised GLM for coherence before, but I would say it has broken down here. You can see it's kind of floating above, which is not great. The roof kind of fallen in, not great. So not a good generation here, I would say. Let's see if we can get nice camera view. For DeepSeek, I would say it feels, I know you can't quite see very well, which is not a good thing either. Yeah, the camera is broken, not a good sign. But you can see here it's quite messy, things not really properly arranged. So this is, again, that sometimes you see with like smaller open source models. I mean, I don't know about smaller, but generally open source models, they seem to be sometimes like kind of almost there, but then things like disordered. So they seem a little bit garbled. And Kimi maybe wins here. I would say, okay, the roof is obviously wrong, but the rest is not too bad. Like, it's quite a nice generation. It should be taller on a taller mountain. It's like on the top of a hill. But apart from this, and the roof, obviously, it's actually a really nice generation. So we had a bunch of 3D generations. There might be some more, but I want to show you some which are more kind of website generations. So, and a few of them are like a little bit older. So they're meant to be a little bit, not just here's like a to-do list, but something where the prompt for this one, I think, is something like, yeah, the front end of a luxury civilian space travel website. So, and you can see the prompt there. So we're trying to push the models to do a little bit more creative work and kind of see how they cope, but making sure it's still kind of coherent, nice interface. So let's see what this looks like. So this is the MiMo 2.5. I would say, to me, I don't particularly like this. The things like really scrunched together. It's all kind of, this is not very impressive. Yeah, they're kind of edges. I mean, it kind of looks like some things are working, but not that impressive. Kimi 2.6, to me, I like this better. So in here we have much nicer interface. Just feels kind of more fresh, right? Versus this. This feels like a little bit old school and kind of not very well designed. So this feels nicer, and things do kind of behave similar. So no particular advantage for anything that MiMo did. DeepSeek, not too bad. I would say, like here it's showing the individual diagrams. Yeah, it feels maybe like a little bit heavier to me. I'm no front-end expert, so I'm just giving more kind of view as a consumer. To me, that maybe feels like a little bit heavier on the eye, so maybe like not quite as a nice design overall. Yeah, and this is the GLM 5.1. Again, remember, this is the leader. Then we have the Kimi K2.6, which are kind of pretty close together, and then the other two. So see what you think. I think this is probably fair. I think this is really nice idea to have this kind of big design element up front and then other elements around it. I do quite like it. So yeah, I would say here between, yeah, I would probably rank them as our leaderboard ranks them. So GLM 5.1, 2.6, Kimi next. Yeah, then DeepSeek is probably the next one. Yeah, MiMo is the worst one. So actually, I think the last two swapped around. But yeah, I think you kind of get the different set of design sensibilities. But I would also say that they do seem to match pretty well to how the 3D generations have gone. So I would say tests seem pretty valid and consistent between the two, but it definitely is good to test the range. So in here, this is the next set where we are looking at the Deep Research Station dashboard. And it's kind of, again, we're looking for more kind of interesting ideas here. So let's just flip through them. So we've got DeepSeek here. We've got GLM here again with the kind of interesting designs, but not as good as the other one, I would say. Kimi K2.6, like not too bad, but maybe the like arrangements a little bit off, I would say. I don't know what you think. MiMo here is actually not bad, like far better, right, than the first one. The first one felt like something was off. So yeah, and here I can see why it's considered like a pretty good model for this kind of more front-end tests. That's not too bad. Just between our website tests, I wanted to show you this one, which is kind of an SVG kind of moving action test. And there's something I noticed that I thought was a little bit interesting. So you can see here where MiMo, maybe come back to this one, GLM 5.1 and DeepSeek, they're all quite similar, the way they kind of come across. But then if you look at Kimi, it's far more kind of ambitious in the way what it's trying to do. So we've got this perfect serve, ace, kind of movement. There's more going on versus this one, right? All of the others feel quite more schematic, and this one feels like much more ambitious and animated. I would say this is good example. That's not too bad. I mean, you can argue it's not amazing, right? It kind of does go over the, yeah, anyway, it's not really, it doesn't look like tennis. But it is interesting about Kimi. It does seem to try to be more agentic. And I have noticed this. Sometimes it will go wrong, where it will try definitely way too much and not really do what it's like, what my prompt was. But that generation kind of stood out to me that it does look quite different to a lot of the others in terms of its ambition of generation. So maybe watch out for that as well, whether you see that maybe Kimi is maybe pushing it forward beyond the maybe your initial prompt, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. I guess it depends what you're trying to do. So the next one, I want to keep looking at like a few more websites, and I want to get a bit of diversity, a bit of feel for how they cope with maybe slightly more unusual prompts. So in here we've got for buying weather risk insurance. And in here, the reason why I like this is a lot of the others look very similar. They're all kind of dark and they all kind of have these same elements. And here I feel like at least DeepSeek here, I think is more creative than others. But let's take a closer look. So we've got like a bunch of different elements here. I quite like the map. There's like slightly sloppy elements here, which I know like people don't like. And obviously a lot of issues like that, I know things like laid out a little bit weirdly, but not too bad overall. I think that's not a bad generation. And you can see how different the GLM one is. That feels really different. I must say I'm quite tired of like this very dark modey kind of generations. Doesn't mean it's bad, but it just feels kind of the same and you get tired of the same thing. But I do like this. I think this is quite nice elements here. Yeah, although I would kind of expect to change that. Anyway, moving on, so Kimi, quite a nice coherent generation, I would say. Peak risk 100% everywhere. It's kind of weird. Surely there should be quite a bit of difference between them. So it's maybe not entirely complete, but that's quite nice. Some favorite sloppy brackets here on the left. A lot of models like them for some reason. Where did they even come from? I don't even know. I've never seen one in real life, so I don't know where the models got them from. Yeah, and MiMo V 2.5 Pro here, I would say did pretty well. Like it's surprisingly actually, apart from like few sloppy kind of elements, they're not too bad. I think they all kind of embraced the challenge and did something original. Now, I think to conclude, let's take a look at another last generation where we've got this, you can see the all light mode. So let's finish on the light note. But we've got the Civic planning portal for fictional floating city. So let's see how they deal with that. I guess MiMo here took for kind of, it should be a planning office, so it made it quite boring. It is a functional website, so that's not too bad. And it actually did try to embrace this floating city idea. So yeah, actually a surprisingly complex website, you know. So that's actually like far more in depth than I would expect it. So that's quite good. So it's a little bit boring, but I guess it is a district website, so maybe I kind of thought about it from this perspective. But for one shot, like honestly, models got so good. This is nice. Then we've got Kimi K 2.6. I would say I do like that better in terms of like the style. To me, that feels nicer. I would have probably voted for Kimi here. And I think it did kind of develop maybe, you know, not quite as extensive as MiMo there. But not bad at all. Like I think this is quite a good generation here. I like maybe style better, but not necessarily the depth. GLM maybe more similar to MiMo in terms of the vibes, but it does feel like quite coherent. Don't really like this gradient, that feels kind of funny, but there's something about GLM that feels like quite coherent when with some of its generations. Like I do like it. Like it's pretty, feels like a steady hand to me. And then we've got here the DeepSeek V4 Pro Thinking. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like the weakest one, right? It's kind of not nicely resizing to my screen, for example. Everything's a little bit scrunched up. This feels quite sloppy to me. So maybe, yeah, maybe that one's probably the weakest one here. So you can see maybe the fact that it's not right up there at the top maybe is not unreasonable for these generations. So what have we learned to conclude? As a reminder, we had GLM 5.1 on top of the leaderboard, and I don't know what you think, but my view is that it really does feel like a really strong model where we've got this kind of coherence of generation. That's probably the closest model to a lot of the closed source models, which I feel like is like it's hard to know where exactly to place it, but does feel like maybe kind of Opus 4.1 kind of level. That feels about right, which is honestly very impressive. So I would say overall, in terms of these kind of generations, maybe not the most creative, but probably the most coherent, the most kind of stable model you can trust. That feels like is GLM 5.1. If we look at the next one was Kimi K 2.6, I would say it has like moments of creativity which feel nicer than GLM, but you can see even in this one where there's definitely some like coherence issues. It doesn't feel quite as stable as GLM model, but certainly like this is a really strong model. I think it does deserve to be second on the leaderboard. Then we've got the MiMo V 2.5 Pro, which is kind of interesting. So it ranks slightly above DeepSeek model, And I can sort of see why it could do that. It does have like its moments, and when the generations do come out, it does come out pretty well, and I think the one we're looking at now is quite good. But there are definitely big issues with it. We definitely saw a number of generations which have this kind of big coherence issues. I mean, I want to say that it is at one speed and seem to be just floating midair. So there's certain issues that we saw that were really, really dramatically bad. So I do wonder if you experience the same thing, if you're using the GLM, the MiMo model rather, whether you're going to experience this kind of more coherence issues or not. And then lastly, we've got the DeepSeek model. Now, maybe this is an unfair generation, but I do feel like DeepSeek is not quite at the level of the other models always. And you can definitely see that it's like, at least in some generations, definitely behind GLM 5.1 for sure. And we do see this kind of issues with coherence, sometimes with structure. I think on the web design it was not too bad, but certainly just feels everywhere, almost on all generation, just feels like a notch weaker. So I do wonder whether it does feel like DeepSeek got into this kind of hopefully new mode. They released clearly a big new model. So I do hope they're going to get into this stride of releasing more models. So like GLM, we had GLM 4.7, 5 and 5.1 in like few months. So I think if DeepSeek gonna do that, I think they're gonna be really up there. So I'm really looking forward to that. So hopefully that gives you a nice feel for how these models perform. And as I always say, it's really, really important for you to test these models. Hopefully what I'm showing you gives you a bit of a feel for what I'm seeing, but it's really important not just to look at the rankings, even our rankings, but it's really important to try it out for yourself. So keep testing, and I'll see you in the next one.